Yo, it's Fernando. Shouts out to Valley Views, man. They played me on the station. I was like, let me make you a jingle. So this is my jingle I made for them. This is what I had to do. This is Valley Views. This is what I had to do. This is Valley Views. Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? Got me singing like, eh, eh, eh. So what you want? I wasn't tripping when I lost my job. No reason to lie to my mom. Now I've got 8, 9 to 5, y'all. I was like, right on, right on, right on. No work on weekends, eh? Waking up early, sleep at 8. I think I'm surely dreaming.
All right, folks. So we're back here on Valley Views, y'all. Again, this is your host, Hector, on Valley Views, KROJ, 101.5 FM here in the San Fernando Valley. And thank you so much for tuning in, being here with us. Our Thursdays are usually, we have a variety of different series, but on this particular Thursday, March 31st, 2022, we have the Meet the Candidates 2022 series. And again, Valley Views and KROJ do not endorse any political candidates or campaigns. Our goal and our mission and our vision really is to educate our audience on a variety of diverse candidates, campaigns that have could potentially have an impact here in our communities in the San Fernando Valley and beyond. And so that is our goal. And we are just very happy to be able to bring to you as many candidates as we can to be able to have within the schedule that we have prior to the primary election, which is happening June 7th, 2022. And with that said, we have in the studio here with us, joining us live here in the city of San Fernando, Kelly Gonez, who is the current LAUSD board president and is running for re-election for the LAUSD board District 6. First of all, Kelly Gonez, welcome to Valley Views on KROJ.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Yes, and we are happy to have you here and happy to just get to know a little bit more about your platform, your campaign. And let's just start with really, so you've been on the board now. You ran successfully the last time around. And so now you're running for re-election. Why is that?
It's a great question. And first, I want to start just by thanking you for the opportunity. I think it's so important that voters are educated on these local issues because oftentimes I think a lot of our focus can be on those national races, presidential election. Obviously, those matter a lot, but we know that our city council races, our school board races, our mayor, these are things that really impact our lives on an everyday basis. And I think especially given the pandemic, we've seen how important strong local leadership is to impacts on our families. And that's really the reason why I'm running for re-election. And thank you, Mr. Perez Roman. I mean, I guess I can call you Hector since we're after hours.
That's fine.
Yes. I don't know how you do this on top of your teaching schedule, but kudos to you and thank you for everything that you do. So I'm running for re-election because I am just so committed to public education and to serving our community. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on the 2017 race and just where I was in my life and where we were in the world back when I ran. And things have changed significantly. I don't think I could have anticipated all of the challenges that we faced in the district over the last 4.5 years. Whether they were wildfires that forced our schools to close and then, a once-in-a-century pandemic that has devastated so many of our kids and families, that has took some of my family members, that has so deeply impacted our schools and our employees. And just thinking about the crisis that faces us all, it's really overwhelming and tremendous. And I think I really want to be there to help support our students and families as we work through all of these challenges. We have such a critical opportunity with, millions and actually billions of dollars in additional funding these next 2 years. But it's so important that we get it right and that we get those resources to our students and families. And beyond that we are not just focused on addressing the last 2 years of impacts, but really historical inequities that have impacted our kids and families in the East San Fernando Valley for generations, whether it be systemic racism or xenophobia or the chronic underfunding of our public schools. And so I am really committed to my work as a leader. This is, I was born and raised in the Valley. This is the community I've grown up in. This is where I'm raising my kids. I can't wait to send my oldest to an LAUSD school next year now that he's old enough. And so I am personally invested in this work so deeply, and I'm committed to doing whatever I can if the voters will have me. Would love to continue serving.
Yes. And along those lines, as we know, and you kind of talked about the, under the historical underfunding of our schools, not just here in the San Fernando Valley, of course, but all throughout our district, which is, it's far and wide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're talking about, from the West Valley, North Valley, East LA down to the harbor, it's a large district. And so when we talk about equity in our schools, in our school district, as a school board member now, what does that really mean to you?
Yeah. I think, we have certain perceptions of equity, and I think I would say, and I love your thoughts on this, but like equity has been a bit of a buzzword in education circles, and a lot of folks use it without necessarily knowing what it means anymore. But my view on equity is really, how are we recognizing historic injustices that have continued to this day, and how are we correcting for them? And my vision of equity is that it must be systemic throughout the system. It's about resource equity for sure, and budgeting equity, and making sure that communities that have been historically underserved get their fair share when it comes to resources and funding. But it's also about equity in our staffing and equity in our curriculum. And I think the district has made a lot of strides. We think about equity in school discipline, where we are a leader in having reduced out-of-school suspensions. Yet at the same time, we know that even among our very low suspension rate, our Black students are suspended at 2-3 times the rate of non-Black students. And so while we have pockets of progress, I really want to see us be a leader on systemic equity across the board. And while we have these pockets of progress, we need to make sure that that's true for every student that we serve. I want to talk about the resource side maybe for a second as well, because it's interesting on the board, we often have these conversations where equity and adequacy is sort of pitted against each other, because it is a struggle. Yeah. We know that every school in the district has been underfunded, and really, if we're being honest, every school in California, every public school has been underfunded for decades, since the passage of Prop 13, where our schools have been robbed of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that should have gone to them. So we have to address the adequacy issue, and we have to make sure every school gets that base level of funding that they need to provide a high quality and engaging program for their kids. But also, it has to be both and. We have to also address those communities that face the highest level of challenge, where we know so many of our students are living in poverty. Maybe they're experiencing homelessness. They have other challenges that they're dealing with in our life. And we know that our public schools are a lifeline for our students and families. So for me, it's really about addressing the adequacy and the equity simultaneously. And it's about what we can do as a district with our own funds, but it's also about that advocacy in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C., because those folks hold the purse strings that we are reliant on as a school district.
Yes, absolutely. And, speaking of the economics in the budget, especially, because of the pandemic and different funds that have been able to be allocated down to LAUSD, where we're looking at, record historical budgets for LAUSD reaching, $20 billion. What do you think have been either one of the priorities made under, your leadership, and or what are, like, moving forward, some of the priorities that need to be, as we know, budgets represent values, in the community, and like how an organization actually spends that budget. But what do you think are some of those priorities that need to really take place with such a large budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one that really rises to the top for me is mental health and socio-emotional supports for students. I've done a lot of engagement with kids over the last couple of years, and even with staff, because I think it's true for our staff as well. And, hearing their stories about just the impacts of isolation, the impacts of trauma, of having lost family members, it's just so significant. And we also know that many of our students were struggling with mental health even before the pandemic, pre-March of 2020. And so, and many of our schools have been advocating for these resources, and our educators have been advocating for these resources. So I'm so glad that it's been a priority for the district to really invest heavily in mental health and bring psychiatric social workers and school psychologists, these experts in mental health, to our school sites. And ideally, I think the goal is to have at least one of those folks at every single school site. And it's not just about the dedication dedicated mental health support, but it's also about how do we partner with other organizations who do this work in the community? How do we ensure that families are included in this work, because we know our families too have been impacted by the same trauma? And then what can we do to also address the mental health and socio-emotional wellness of our staff? I'm so deeply concerned about just the effects of burnout and also the experience of the pandemic as people, which our staff have experienced, in addition to the experience of being educators and workers in our classrooms and on our school sites. We know that it has taken such a toll, and the work is so hard, and it was hard before the pandemic, and it is only more so now. So I think that mental health needs to continue to be a top priority for us as a district. We know that if kids don't feel taken care of and seen socially and emotionally, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to be successful in their learning. It's, Maslow's before Bloom's, as we say.
Yep.
And so I think that needs to continue to be a priority. Another area I would highlight is my work around universal preschool. And we know that childcare in our communities has been in limited supply for many years. This is another systemic problem. But many childcare options and programs throughout not just the district, but the state of California have closed in the middle of the pandemic. And so many families don't have quality, affordable, or free options in the community. And LAUSD, we've been a leader in preschool for many, many years, for decades even. And yet, we've had to cut slots back in the Great Recession that we have not grown back. Yeah. And so when we think about how do we invest dollars to ensure the academic and socio-emotional success of our kids, universal preschool is a no-brainer, and that's why I've been a leader on the board really pushing for that. We know that it's important not just for the young kids because, they're getting high-quality learning experiences, they're learning through play. Visiting our LAUSD preschools, it's a joy to see because the kids are learning and also they love being at school. But it's also important for families. It's important for our working families to know that they have access to these types of programs. And I know, as a high school teacher yourself, you're going to see those benefits from those kids who are able to attend preschool once they get to your high school class. So those would just be, there's many, many things I could highlight, but those would be two top ones for me.
No, absolutely. And, along the same lines, but with a specific program, special education, the federal government has, a variety of requirements when it comes to special ed programs. And, at the end of the day, some of those requirements, policies aren't necessarily attached to dollars, federal dollars. And so what do you see as a solution to, really meet the needs of the requirements, but more importantly, the special ed population in our district to be able to really meet the needs of our students, meeting the requirements, but also being able to address the funding gap, if you will, that currently exists?
Absolutely. Well, this is definitely a complicated issue. I feel like we could talk about it for a while, but a couple of different thoughts. So on the funding side, absolutely. There is a funding problem at the federal level, also at the state level when it comes to how we are funding special education. As a district, we spend about $1 billion out of our what is usually an $8 billion budget. So an eighth of our budget is going to special education. And we are only compensated for half of those costs. So we're eating the other half of costs, and it's not sustainable because we know that our kids have so many needs, particularly those who have IEPs or 504 plans, and even what we're doing, we should be doing more, but financially it's not affordable. So I think the first step is on the advocacy piece and really pushing for the full funding of IDEA at the federal level, which is something I've been a leader on the board. I've been to Washington a number of times speaking to our legislators specifically about this. Back when IDEA was authorized in the 1970s, it was promised that the federal government would cover 40% of the costs of special education. Where we are at today, pre-pandemic, it was about 9% that they were covering. Maybe there's been a small increase. So maybe they're around 10%, but that's still 30%, which is hundreds of millions of dollars that we're not receiving that our kids deserve. And in fact, were promised when they passed this legislation originally. And then when it comes to the state level, one of the challenges we see is in LA Unified, while our general enrollment has gone down, our population of students with disabilities has gone up. And in fact, especially our population of kids with more moderate and severe disabilities, which means, they have more intense needs. Maybe they have physical impairments that we need to provide extra supports for. And of course, all of the supports cost money. Yet the way that special education is funded in the state of California does not take into account the specific needs of kids. And that, in my opinion, is inequitable and unfair and should be corrected. If we really want to make sure that our kids with disabilities are able to be successful, we have to take into account their needs, and the funding should be related to the needs of kids. And so I know that Governor Newsom is actually looking at the special education formula. He wants to revamp it. So it's a perfect opportunity for all of us in labor, educators, families, all of the disability rights groups to work together to really make sure we're rectifying that problem. And then when it comes to now the district side of the house and how we're spending that money, I think a lot of our focus on special education is often kind of a compliance mindset, and there's good reason for that. The district was successfully sued a couple of decades ago, and we were under a federal consent decree overseeing our special education programs because they were not serving kids at the way that they should. So there's a compliance mindset around like, okay, so our service being provided, yes, they are. I think it really needs to be about quality, and it really needs to be about truly meeting the individualized needs of a child, which is why they have an IEP, an individualized education program. And I think that we need a shift as a district to really being more centered on that original intention behind the IDEA. I'm interested in opportunities potentially to lower class sizes for our special education teachers. I was, talking to one last week actually who was sharing just about what a challenge it is. And in the pandemic, he's seen a lower caseload because we've reduced class sizes as part of our pandemic response. But he knows that his class size is likely to go back up, and he has to cover many, many different students who have unique needs across many different grade levels. And to me, if we want kids to be successful, we should be finding ways to make sure that their teachers can individualize and meet those specific needs that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like in there, you address some of the, again, like highlighting some of the equity issues as well. And just the amount of, like you said, the complexity that comes with the special education population in the district. And, another special, targeted special population that kind of really reflects a little bit of what's going on, not just here in the San Fernando Valley, but really throughout our city and really our nation relates to, housing, our unhoused neighbors, and, the homeless crisis and how that impacts education, our communities, and also foster care, foster youth. And so what are some of your priorities as, candidate moving forward into the next term for you to be able to address and really provide that support for both, students, families experiencing homelessness, and also our foster youth?
Absolutely. Maybe just, one more thing on the special education. I did want to give a credit to and shout out to the district for some of the programs we provide. One of the jewels, I think, of Board District 6 is Lowman Special Education Center and Career Transition Center. And, it's a school that serves only children with disabilities, some of them moderate to severe. And back a few years ago, there was a threat of closure to the school potentially because the enrollment was low. And I'm really proud that the community and the families fought for the center to be open. And we've actually added on the Career Transition Center so that when kids, are 22 and they can't be served by the general special education program anymore, there's career pathways that are now being offered. And so I think that programs like that, we really need to be studying and thinking about how they can be models for others.
Thank you for highlighting that. Oh, that's good.
And a lot of people don't know that we offer those types of services, which I think are really exemplary, and we've got to give credit where credit's due. To your question around students experiencing homelessness, it's a big priority for me. We know in the East San Fernando Valley, we have some of the highest rates of students experiencing homelessness. I think a lot of people think about the need in our district, and maybe they assume like South LA or Skid Row is where the most families are who are experiencing homelessness. But we know that there are many families who are invisibly experiencing homelessness throughout our communities, who are living doubled, tripled up in garages without running water, without a safe place to sleep or do their homework. And it is the same level of crisis to me. So one of the things that I've led on as a school board member is really looking to what can we do to address the underlying challenge that our students experiencing homelessness are facing. We do a great job of providing wraparound services, and so we provide school supplies, hygiene kits. We connect them to other resources. But the underlying challenge that our students experiencing homelessness are facing is they don't have a safe and stable place to live. And so I think that the district, as the largest landowner in the county, needs to be part of the solution when it comes to creating affordable housing in LA County. And it's been an issue. I passed a resolution successfully before the board back in the fall of 2018. Okay. So it's been several years. And as you probably know, supporting our unhoused neighbors is a political hot potato. And so I think there was real reticence among some, not me, in the district to actually take this work on and start to do some of these buildings. We have now started analyzing properties, and we're looking at opportunities to build housing, both as affordable housing for our workforce, because we know that our employees are facing these challenges as well, but also for families that lack access to stable housing. So I'd like to see us not just continue that work, but really accelerate it, because we know and I know I've had, families come up to me when I'm visiting their schools, tell me I got an eviction notice today and I'm trying to support my kindergartner and being successful at school while I'm dealing with this crisis. And so I think we really need to be part of that systemic solution up on the housing front, and then continue to accelerate the supports we do provide for students experiencing homelessness, for students in the foster care system. We know that these are among the highest needs students that we serve. Yeah. They're at promise, and I've seen many of our students who are experiencing these challenges go on to amazing things, but it is about the resources. It is about someone who knows their name and who cares about them at the school site. So it's really about deepening the supports on that side that we do provide.
Yeah, and what about as far as the just foster youth? What are some either programs that you feel will really support? Because just speaking to many educators, sometimes it seems like when you have foster youth that kind of are also in a way rotating in and out of schools, it makes it very difficult to really reach and impact in a positive way, the youth that are in that situation of foster care. But what are some of your plans moving forward to really address some of those also inequities that do happen at times?
For sure. I think it's about leadership having a clear focus on these students. And, in almost every role that I've played, I have been the one who's focusing on vulnerable students, and some other folks are not as focused on it. And so I think one of the important things as part of my role is really ensuring that this is at the front of the board's agenda. While we know that our population of foster youth is small compared to the overall student population, we also know that they deserve unique attention and supports. First, I would say, foster youth have the right to stable educational placement. And in my experience on the board, interacting with schools, sometimes there's not a level of understanding about the rights that foster youth and homeless youth have to continue attending their school of residence. Even if their actual residence changes, they still have the right to go to, what's called their school of origin. So first, it's about making sure everyone understands the rights of our youth and can fully implement those requirements. And then I would point back to, we've had different counseling supports that have been available to our foster youth. It's kind of changed orientation since I've been on the board. I also wanted to point out, I believe it's the A through G diploma counselor. So we have a specific program that is focused on A through G completion, college and career readiness for vulnerable student populations. So that would be students who are chronically absent, students experiencing homelessness, and foster youth. And I've had a chance to interact with some of these folks, and I've been so impressed by what they've been able to accomplish. And again, they're the advocates for their students on campus. And so not only are they supporting directly with, you're behind on these credits, you need to take these classes, but they're making direct connections to colleges to make sure that they go from our foster youth support program to the one at Valley College.
Yeah.
They are also advocating within schools to make sure that their teachers know what's going on with them, that they get the specific support that they need. And so I do really think it's about having that advocate at the school site who is knowledgeable, who is caring, and who can be present as much as possible. I think with some of these smaller student populations, we've sometimes faced a challenge where the specialized support is there 1-2 days a week. And we know that kids experience challenges every day of the week. And so as much as we can do to really concentrate those resources where there are high populations, I think that's important because it makes all the difference for that individual student.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And just a couple more questions here, but the other one was just to really just to pivot a little bit here, but talk about charter schools and like and just in general. When we look at charter schools across the nation, different states, California has the greatest amount of charter schools. I think the last data I saw was a little bit over 1,200 charter schools here in the state of California. And of course, some of those are here in Los Angeles, and we have some here in the Valley as well. But just in general, as a school board member for LAUSD, what have you seen and what do you think moving forward needs to happen as far as like when it comes to charter schools, their growth, and it seems like sometimes there's contention and tension because when a charter school opens up, with in general enrollment being at times siphoned from a traditional public school to a charter, that sometimes creates tension among the community. So what do you think just in general the role of the district should be, and then you as a school board member related to charter schools, not just in your community, in your board district 6, but really throughout the district?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think on the one hand, we have seen some really helpful state legislative changes around charters. I think one of the biggest challenges was, pre 2019, we were under the same charter school legislation as had created charter schools originally back in the 1990s. And things have changed dramatically when it comes to the enrollment picture at our traditional public schools in those 20 years. And so luckily the state legislature took it up. They passed AB 1505, which has really shifted to allow us as school districts to really consider the impacts of each and every charter school as they come before that, rather whether it's with regard to renewal or with regard to new petitions that come. Previously, basically, if you were a charter school and you submitted the petition that met all the compliance requirements, there was nothing that the board or any board could do. And so I'm really glad that legislation passed, because I think it allows us to be really thoughtful about what are the impacts on the broader community. Yeah. And in fact, community impact is one of the key pieces of analysis you can look at as making these decisions. And then I think as an authorizer, we do oversee more than 100, I believe it's more than 150 charter schools, independent charter schools in LA Unified. And the original goal of charter schools was really, you get autonomy, but you need to produce outcomes, and there has to be accountability for those outcomes. And so as an authorizer, I think it's really about ensuring that we're seeing those outcomes, particularly for the most vulnerable students. And in LA Unified, we've been leaders about ensuring that charters are serving similar populations as traditional district schools. So if there's a high level of students experiencing homelessness at your neighborhood school, then that charter school should be serving a comparable student population. Not only should there not be barriers for those populations, but they actually should be enrolling at the same level, so that there's not any examples of cherry picking, for example. And then as the board member for Board District 6, I'm really proud of my record, because when we've seen charter schools that are coming before us with poor academic outcomes, operational issues, governance issues, financial issues, we have not approved their renewal. And in some cases, those schools have closed. There continue to be issues because, of course, they can appeal to the county,
or the state.
And right. Sometimes those decisions, in my opinion, are not based on facts, but maybe based on politics. And so not always is the recommendation of staff followed in those discussions, but I think we've done what we can, and I think moving forward, we have a really strong policy in LA Unified around taking into account the community impact of any new schools that are coming. The board has not approved any new charter schools in over 2 years now, and in Board District 6, there's been a net decrease in charter schools since I've been on the board, and I think that's really a recognition of, one, our traditional district schools are doing a really strong job. We have lots of great options within the district. There are also strong charter schools that are doing work in our community. So I don't feel that there's a need for more, especially given what we're seeing with declining enrollment, dropping birth rates, families leaving LA County. I think it's really about how are we improving the options that we do have and ensuring that if they're outside of the system, that they are also serving kids well.
Right. And one of my last questions here just relates to one of the things that we saw a lot, especially in 2020 during the pandemic, was the racial reckoning, if you will, after the murder of George Floyd. And one of the things, we saw that here. In fact, we covered some of that out in Los Angeles and places here in the San Fernando Valley. And so part of that was, we had a movement here in Los Angeles which called for the defunding of school police. And I believe it was about $25 million that was reallocated. Mm-hmm. And so what are your plans as well for, one, what did that look like? The $25 million, pretty much being defunded from school police in the actual schools. And two, do you plan as just a board member to continue with some of those same policies from legislation or, school board decisions made with the call for defunding school police?
Yeah, I mean, one, I want to give credit to the advocates because we know that it was students and community members and parents who were really pushing for this change. And that has been the case, I think, throughout all of the recent history in LA Unified around really reducing the school to prison pipeline and decriminalizing our approach to student discipline. So whether that was, no longer ticketing students for being truant or our approach to out-of-school suspensions, most recently, are getting rid of the random wanding policy where our students were wanded with a metal detector at all of our secondary schools. These were decisions that were made very slowly by the board, though I think ultimately all the right decisions. But without the community being there and really calling for these, it wouldn't have happened. So I want to give them credit. So in terms of the reduction of school police, you're right on the number. Yes, it was a $25 million reduction, 35% of their budget. And what that really led to was, instead of an approach where we're placing law enforcement on school campuses where we're hearing from Black students that it is a trauma and it is harmful to have them present, we actually invested our money in school climate coaches. So folks from the community whose job is not to enforce discipline or law, but instead is really to help develop the whole school positive climate, which is what we want for kids, right? It's not about punishment. It's about how you're promoting a positive and welcoming climate for students, and how are you enabling students to deal with conflict in a healthy way. So we have funded those positions across the district at all secondary schools. We also leverage those funds to create the Black Student Achievement Plan, and really a recognition of systemic racism that Black students and communities have faced in public education for many, many decades and for centuries, and that we needed to do something different to serve Black students well. And I think one of the most wonderful parts about it is that our Black students, families, and advocates were at the table to determine what it looked like. And so what we're investing in is, we're doing a curriculum audit. And so really looking at our curriculum to make sure not just that it's culturally responsive, but actually representative of, the contributions of the Black community over many, many years. And it's not a whitewashed version of history and of literature. Yeah. We've also invested in more mental health supports and socio-emotional supports at our campuses with the largest Black student population. We're bringing in community partnerships. We're investing in more teaching staff at those schools so they can have lower class sizes. So there's a lot of different areas of investment. And I want to highlight that even though the Black Student Achievement Plan has only really been implemented, during the pandemic, we are already seeing positive results, in student attendance, in growth in English language arts and math, in progress towards getting their high school diploma. So already we're seeing that when the investments and the resources and the belief is there, our Black students can excel, but it is really about continuing those investments. And I am interested in continuing the work and investing in non-law enforcement based approaches to school discipline and to responding to incidents. We know that it's a challenging time. I want to acknowledge that a lot of our schools are facing additional challenges. Students are having gone through a trauma, are having trouble reacclimating, for sure. That is a real challenge, and that is valid. I think that we need to do more to put more supports at school sites so that we can address the underlying challenges that kids may be facing. Goes back to the mental health piece, as I mentioned before, and really building out safe passage programs with our community partners, building out violence interruption programs, gang intervention and youth development work with the city of LA, with other community partners. So there's a lot more work to do. I think that, the vote back in the summer of 2020 was the beginning, and it's really about how do we build out this new infrastructure for how we support schools on this front.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a big shout out there to Students Deserve as well.
Yep.
And with that said, really the final question that I have here for you, Kelly, is just what are some closing remarks that you want to leave our audience with?
Well, thank you for all of the rich questions, a lot of really important topics we've touched on. I am really proud of the record that I built over the last 4.5 years, and the work that I've done, I think, to really be a progressive champion on the board, an advocate for our public schools, whether here locally or at the state and federal level, and ultimately the support and advocacy I've provided for our community here in the East San Fernando Valley. I, think about my campaign, and I've got lots of really wonderful endorsements, LA County Democratic Party, LA County Federation of Labor, but the ones that, and lots of wonderful elected officials as well, but the ones that really matter the most are the people who've gotten to know me as I've been their school board member. The classroom teacher who was listened to by me and who felt supported. I got their air conditioning fixed, for example. That actually really matters. Or a principal who I've met with, who I've been responsive to a community need that they were facing. A parent who's done one of our parent cabinets or our Parents as Partners program. A student who's been involved in our student advisory cabinet. These are the voices that really speak for the community and who've gotten to know me and to see my work as a school board member. And I think they can vouch for just my dedication to this work. I am tireless in my advocacy for our community and how much I care. And I think it's not just about listening, but for me, it's really about doing. Hearing the concerns of students or community members or educators and being responsive to that. And I think that my record speaks for itself on that front. And it's actually that type of work, those conversations, visits to schools, that's what drives me every day. And I would just close with, I am now a mom. I've given birth twice while in office. I'm the only parent of young.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yes.
And
I've seen your kids around.
Yes, yes, they're going to be out knocking doors very soon. But one of them I gave birth to during the pandemic, so I know how hard it has been for our families over the last 2 years, and I'm in it too. And thinking about my kids, thinking about what I want for my boys in their lives, I understand what our families are fighting for every day, and I fight just as hard for their kids as I do for my own.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Again, on behalf of KROJ Valley Views here on 101.5 FM in the San Fernando Valley, we just want to thank Kelly Gonez, the current LAUSD board president and candidate for Board District 6. And with that said, we want to just thank our listening audience for being here with us on Thursdays and Sundays. And also a special announcement, we do have after this our premiere show that's happening today, and that is Conversations with Calypso and Justiana. So stay tuned for that, y'all, and we'll be right back.
Yo, it's Fernando. Shouts out to Valley Views, man. They played me on the station. I was like, let me make you a jingle. So this is my jingle I made for them. This is what I had to do. This is Valley Views. This is what I had to do. This is Valley Views. Got me singing like, hey, hey, hey. So what you want? Got me singing like, hey, hey, hey. So what you want? Got me singing like, hey, hey, hey. So what you want? Got me singing like, hey, hey, hey. So what you want? I wasn't tripping when I lost my job. No reason to lie to my mom. Now I've got 8, 9 to 5, y'all. I was like, right on, right on, right on. No work on weekends, eh? Waking up early, sleep at 8. I think I'm surely.